So we have our first track session here today. I'm going to be going through the comms track session, which is on code, communication and culture, looking at a new blueprint for intranet ownership. If you just bear with us a second, we're waiting to get the right slides up. But this session is really all about intranet ownership, intranet governance, and I've been working very closely with loads of customers over the years to try and refine what the right formula is. And in this session, we are lucky enough to be joined by one of our customers who will walk us through a little bit how they've implemented it. Cool. So first and foremost, hopefully you've just come from the keynote session with Louis Theroux. As I said, we are currently in the comms track. Hopefully you're here because you want to be, and of course because we're the best session. But if for whatever reason you want to switch to the tech track session, we have an alternate session on beyond the box widget development. So if that sounds more like your bag, then all you need to do is head back to unily.com/unite-21, and then you're able to select from the upcoming sessions, switch over to the tech track if that's more for you. So let's get started. My name is Kaz. I'm a product manager here at Unily. I'm also one of the Unite hosts, and I'm here live in the London studio. I'm lucky enough to be joined by Heinz Korten from WACKER, and I will let him introduce himself for you.
Hello, Kaz. Hello, everybody. My name is Heinz Korten. I've been working with WACKER for almost 3 years. Right now, I'm in the IT department for HR services. Before that, I worked at Telefonica Germany for a long, long time. And my interest and focus has always been at the intersection of, let's say, technology and communication. That means services with an impact on many employees, like large intranets or newsrooms, or related applications such overall company streamings or an intelligent knowledge search. I'm very happy and excited to present here with Kaz and give a few insights of what we've done at WACKER.
Cool. Thanks, Heinz. And Heinz and I have worked very closely together on the implementation project about 2 years ago, so we go way back now. But before we dive into the detail, what I wanted to do first was basically just to establish exactly what we mean by intranet ownership, more specifically what we don't mean. And on the screen you should hopefully see two terms. One is ownership and one is possession. And I just wanted to spend a bit of time on establishing the difference between those two things, because sometimes I feel those terms are used interchangeably, or sometimes people use the word ownership when really what they mean is possession. And there's a difference there, because if you look at possession, possession can be a bit more detached. It's more about control. And for me personally, I feel you can be in ownership of something without being in total control of it. Whereas ownership in the context that we're discussing today is not synonymous with possession. It doesn't equate to the same thing. And the difference there is that ownership is much more about responsibility. And responsibility means consciously working towards the success and adding value of the intranet. So that's what we really mean when we're talking about ownership. And this is important because in the context of intranets, intranets are really a bit of an anomaly technology in that the role that they serve for your organization is very unique. So we have to make sure that we understand what ownership is and what we're signing up for. So please do bear in mind what we're talking about when we talk about ownership. Now, moving on. So let's first have a little think about why we need to change ownership. Why do we need a new blueprint? And in order to do that, I want to think a little bit about where do we start? Where did intranets come from? What's the history of ownership? And this is a bit of a messy one. The ownership of intranets has been fragmented and yeah, a bit of a hot mess at times. But we did some work here at Unily, as well as speaking with some of our customers to try and understand, okay, are there common trends that we've seen? And from that, we were able to roughly gauge some eras, as we've termed them, of intranet ownership. And this doesn't necessarily mean that every era has applied to every organization. We know that different organizations have been on their own unique journeys, and some have engaged in these eras, some not so much. But it's really helpful to try and understand how this has progressed. So typically starting at the beginning, what we've termed here the comms era, and this is where intranets really started. So we're thinking about back in the day, early internet technology. It's the communicators and organizations that were pioneers of the intranet. They could see that the internet had power, that their employees were starting to become connected to the internet, and they could see that they could reach their employees via the internet. So these savvy communicators would spin up WordPress sites and other sorts of internet sites, put up information there, and distribute all the content to their employees. That was super helpful. Some common traits you might see in a comms era intranet ownership is that they tend to be heavily focused around being a corporate news portal, not so much of the productivity elements, and that's a common trait that we see. Now, over time, what happened with intranets is that people saw that these intranets were quite useful. More departments wanted to put information on them, and over time, the scope of them grew, and so did the technology needs. And at the same time, we've got organizations going through digital transformation, and we've got growing IT teams. So communicators were basically like, oh, well, this is a lot more than we signed up for with our intranet, and this technology stuff's getting quite complex. And at the same time, we've got our IT department who's growing. They know all about this technology stuff. And it's not just a comms thing anymore. So here you go, IT department, here's the intranet. And this is where we find ourselves in the IT era. Now, common traits you might expect in this era is that you have an intranet which is productivity focused. It might be very capable and feature rich, but not necessarily user driven. And that's particularly interesting because I've seen it in a lot of cases where IT departments, where they're in ownership or possession of the intranet, should we say, what we often see there is that they'll lump an intranet project almost as a sub-project as a productivity cloud rollout, whether that's Microsoft 365 or whether that's the Google suite. What we've seen is that IT teams will typically put the whole thing together without really understanding what use cases they're trying to serve. And this is the IT era. And we've also got a third, quite distinct era, which we saw in some organizations. And for the purpose of this, I called it the whoever holds the budget era. And the reason I've called it that is because, well, I think over time, there's been a lot of confusion about intranets and what role they serve. Is it a comms portal? Is it a HR hub? Is it a productivity tool? Is it something we need for compliance? All these questions of confusion that are going around have led to confusion of the use cases of the intranet. And what that's meant is that some people have ended up in ownership of the intranet just because it was the department that had the right budget at the right time and just had the will in order to implement it. So I've seen some bizarre ownership models out there. I've seen an intranet owned by health and safety before, so and I'm sure there's even quirky ones out there. So you can see here some distinct eras, and I've kind of oversimplified just to make the point, but I think the thing to take away from this slide is that we do have trends of intranet ownership, and what you'll notice here is that these trends tend to be quite tightly tied to the complexity of the technology and to who seems to possess the technology or the budget, rather than being quite use case driven. So with that summary aside, hopefully you kind of understood some of that. I'm not necessarily saying every organization has been through that. We know everyone's on their unique journey. Perhaps you've experienced one of those. Maybe you've had all three. Maybe you've gone all the way around and back again and you're back in your comms era, and that's totally fine. But moving on from there, I'm actually really intrigued just to try and find out where you guys think you're at. So hopefully I've done a good summary of those three eras, and we should have a poll coming up on the screen, which is which era that I've just showed you most reflects your current ownership model. So it doesn't have to be 100% aligned. You may be in a transition stage, also fine, but just keen to know what you guys are seeing, what era you think you're in. And I'll give you 30 seconds or so to ponder, gather your thoughts, and put your answer in. Cool, so got answers coming in. I'm going to wait for a few more. I'm actually genuinely intrigued because we've never done anything like this before, so I'm really intrigued. Give it another 20 more seconds.
just a little bit more, right?
Yes. Great, so 10 more seconds, just waiting for the results to come in.
So $1 million question.
Yeah, it is the $1 million question. It's an important one, we don't want to rush it. I'll give it 20 more seconds, and then maybe we'll move on. Just having some. Okay, cool. So I'm going to just move on quickly, and then if we've got time at the end, hopefully I'll come back to it, and it will be something to look forward to. But so I guess the next logical question is: we've seen those three eras. Whatever era you're in, I think the important thing to think about is, well, you may be actually asking yourself, what's wrong with being in any of those eras? You may say, oh, I'm in the comms era, or I'm in the IT era. I'm quite happy with that. And someone actually asked me this question when we were running through the slides, like, what's wrong with any of those eras? And the first way that came to mind to describe it, or the analogy that first came to mind, was being in one of those eras is a bit like a tennis game, where on one side you've got IT with their bat, racket. You can tell I'm not a sports person. So you've got IT with their racket on their side, and then you've got comms with their racket on the other side of the tennis game, and then you've got this little tennis ball in the middle, which is the intranet. And it's just being like hit from one side to the other, from comms to IT, from IT to comms, whether that's a reflection of who owns the intranet, or whether that's more some shady commentary about how those two teams seem to collaborate together. I'll leave completely up to you. But the point to take away from that is, in a tennis game, you've got those two departments that are kind of playing against each other. You've got this kind of stagnant game back and forth, and it's not necessarily progressive. It's just two players competing against each other. That's why being in one of those eras isn't great. And the way I describe it is where we want to get to is more like a game of football. Or if you're in the US, you'll call it soccer. That always feels really unnatural for me to say that, but hopefully it makes sense. So we want to move from tennis more towards a game of football, which is, of course, a team sport. So, of course, you're going to have your players there, you're going to have your IT, your comms, but there's many more players on the pitch or as part of that team. So you're going to have HR there, you're going to have your executive team, you're going to have compliance, you're going to have marketing. All these teams, all these players working together as part of a team. And it's not about who's necessarily the best, it's that team working together. And most importantly, they're working towards the exact same goal. And they're much better working together as a team towards that goal. And just to kind of finish that analogy off, what I realize is, like, the most important thing is that your crowd is happy. And in this analogy, the crowd is your users, your employees. So we really want to make that transition from a stagnant game of tennis competing against each other to a good collaborative team sport like football or soccer. So the next logical question for me was, okay, cool. Hopefully I've convinced you we want to move from tennis to soccer, but how do we do that? And unfortunately, there isn't one checklist that you can go away and implement. However, we have invested some time in looking at some of our world-leading clients and seeing with our customers, where does intranet ownership work best? Where is it most collaborative? Where do we see the best outcome in the solution that ultimately benefits employees, and what are the characteristics of that? So when we did that work, we invested to try and understand, and of course there were different things with different organizations, but there were kind of three common characteristics we noticed. And just for the fun of it, we wanted to give this era a name, and we've labeled this the digital HQ era. And this is important because we're making a transition from the language of the comms era, the IT era. It's not about a department-led ownership. It's more about the use case and what role the intranet is actually serving. So really want to move towards this kind of digital HQ era. And the three characteristics that we saw that really help us make that transition, the first one is about common responsibility. And common responsibility, obviously responsibility is that key word we saw from ownership earlier. This is really important because common responsibility is about having clearly defined goals and making sure that you've got more vested stakeholders who are all defining those goals. Those goals are representative, not just very focused goals, they're representative of all different use cases, and all those stakeholders are actively working towards those goals. So that's what common responsibility is about. And to labour the point about responsibility again, it's like genuine responsibility. It's not just about having someone's name down in a responsibility matrix. It's feeling like the people that are working on intranets feel a genuine responsibility to progress the intranet and that it's servicing the employees in the way that it needs to be. And that has to be genuine. The second characteristic is all about advocation for users. So this is really about being super laser focused on what the role of the intranet is and ultimately how it's benefiting your end users, your employees. I think the way we get this is we need to get more opinions and expectations in the room, and we have to make sure that we've got when we say advocation for users, it's not just speaking generally about our employees, it's about understanding what pockets of our organization exist, what are those employee groups that exist, and making sure that they're represented and that their needs are met with the intranet. And that means all employee groups, so up and down the hierarchy, from different departments, different job types, even, employees in different locations, but even diverse employees. So we're talking about employees with different backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, employees with different accessibility requirements. So when we say advocation for users, that is all about making sure your employees are represented and their needs are met by the intranet. And last but not least is the characteristic of having an agile approach. And you may look at agile and be like, oh, that's a bit of a buzzword. But I really wanted to talk about this because as much as there's awareness of like agile practices, for whatever reason, I've seen it in so many of our customers or so many different people or intranet implementations, is that agile seems to be something that's used in IT projects and kind of just not necessarily made the transition into the day-to-day working of intranet management and intranet ownership. And so I really think we can take some of the best working practices from Agile, implement them into the way that we deal with our intranet daily and how we iterate and evolve on the intranet. Because I think if there's anything we've learned from the last 18 months is that your intranet has to be able to pivot in order to meet whatever needs it has to be. That may be employees' job types changing, it may be remote working. It has to be so flexible that you can very quickly and easily flex the technology to meet whatever needs you need to meet. So those are the three characteristics. Hopefully you can remember those in your brain, take them away. Personally, I'm someone that knows how to best implement something once I see it applied, which is why we really wanted to have this session with Heinz and WACKER, because I've worked with them closely and they're a model example of this being implemented. And what I'm going to do is hand over to Heinz, and you can hopefully look out for some of the characteristics I've outlined and see how they've been implemented at WACKER. You there, Heinz?
Thank you, Kars. So let's go for better understandings, just a little bit to WACKER. For better understandings what we're talking about, just a few words about WACKER. WACKER is in the chemical industry in many sectors with a large product portfolio. Polymers, silicones, polysilicones and biosolution, and its products are ranging from, let's say, cosmetic powders to solar cells. But right here, one thing is really important to mention. WACKER has a long history and tradition, founded over 100 years ago. WACKER is a global player and active in 32 countries with 26 production sites. The name of our intranet is WACKER Globe. It was fully rebuilt on the Unity platform. The intranet went live, it's about 1 year ago in July 2020. And a couple of weeks ago, we launched this new homepage that you can see on your screen right now. And the clear objective was to further develop our user-centric approach. a fresh design that spotlights key content, that makes attractive for news and personalized news. So on the top, you have a large slider for the corporate news, and above you have announcement ticker, for example, for service times on the WACKER Globe Intranet, or a place for new joiners. Below you'll find personalized news sorted against unread user stories first, and what's not visible on the screen right here, you have two brand new sections for panorama and focus used for behind the scenes stories, and that's also user-centric, a transparent integration of analytics. That means that page views are on the top in each news article.
I think also what's really cool to outline there is like, how do you get to that sort of output? So obviously it looks cool, we've got loads of great things on it, but you guys really invested in making sure that it was ultimately your employees designing that homepage. You had 10, 15 different workshops with employees across all the organization, different job types, really getting involved in that process, understanding the use cases. So it's just to kind of outline the amount of hard work that went into crafting the right sort of homepage, because the homepage is super important. Also, actually, just to give you a plug, you guys are WACKER's up for the Best Homepage Award at the awards on day 3.
Please vote.
Please vote. Obviously, we're a bit biased, but so if you're joining us on day 3, you're actually able to go to the Unly site now and vote. So yeah.
So let's take just a short step back. So it's really worth asking about stakeholders and forces that are important for such a big project like a global internet project is. WACKER, like almost every larger company, has to deal with these conditions and constraints like, budget restrictions, challenging customer expectation, or cost and headcount reduction programs, and the question, do we have the right skills still on board? And last but not least, this digitalization process, especially in these disruptive pandemic and the new normal times. So the real question is right here, how to make internet projects successful in this VUCA world. And the best is to think of a Swiss Army knife. Just for a moment, please imagine the wildness of your project. So you need more than one tool to survive. You need a knife to carve out your top requirements. You need a good fish hook to catch up your right priorities. And you need a ruler to measure your project progress, and much, much more. But your project will only be successful if you take all these 3 areas into account. That means code, communication, and culture. So let's start with code, as known as IT. As you know from your daily business, there are a lot of IT tools that helps you to develop your internet continually, quickly, thoughtfully. But the key point here is WACKER introduced and introduces agility on an organizational level. Agility is no longer just an IT mindset. As you can see on the screen, on an operational level, Azure DevOps with its backlog, sprints, Kanban board help us to work together easily with departments, comms, and external partners. So, in one word, we have a really seamless and diligent process starting from requirements, user stories, and ending up in real source code. Here you can see IT is a real driver and enabler for a user-first approach. The next important aspect is communication. That's quite obvious for an internet project, isn't it?
Definitely.
Right. So before, with the old intranet, we have a really strong focus on deep organizational structures down to individual teams. All content and all topics were in silos. So it was very key for us to change this towards a topic-driven approach and topic-driven architecture. So right here you can see the focus is no longer on org units. Content and context are the real important elements. And another benefit is Such an information architecture is much more resilient to company-wide reorganizations, which we had recently at WACKER. So in the following slides, I'll show you some examples of key features that help us to drive our user-centric approach. You know it all. A good search is very important. So this global search helps us to find content and text simultaneously and immediately in different areas. So not only in the intranet itself, but in SharePoint that is natively integrated. And as you can see on the screen on the right side, there are as well instant search results from ServiceNow and other resources that you want to browse. So you could say usability on the one hand and productivity on the other hand are improved at once. Another crucial element is our concept of portfolios. With these portfolios came a shift from a description from an org structure towards a description of, let's say, what a department offers to the company and to other employees. And due to its nature of structured content, portfolios can also be found via search and search refiners that we have seen in the screen before.
Just to put the portfolio into wider context as well. So I mentioned earlier how Heinz and I worked on the implementation project team for this, and as we were going through the workshops and we were designing all the key elements of the intranet, there was something kind of just niggling at the back where I could sense from the project team there was just something missing. And what I kept hearing was, given the type of company WACKER is, there's so many experts and specialists within the organization doing very niche things, like real nuggets of knowledge that exist within either individual people or teams that needs to be accessible to everyone across the organization. And that's what I kept hearing. It was like, okay, so how do we access this information? And it seemed the gap was really, how do we give complete transparency and visibility of all the amazing broad niche services that are happening across the company? And that's where this concept really birthed out of. It was us sitting in a workshop room designing it, saying, okay, let's flex the technology. This is what needs to work for your company. Let's design something that specifically works for WACKER, and that's how you get this sort of output. It's something that's very specific to the use cases that need to come out with WACKER.
So right here on the screen that you can see, here's a portfolio in action. So it describes the service of delivering a sustainability progress report. So the key thing is its content structure is the same as of other portfolios in the system. That's good for search on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's really comfortable to manage in the content management system. The context is described via tags and related links, for example, to contacts, experts, FAQ, and other resources.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. So that like visually, imagine you're trying to find or research about a very niche service that exists within WACKER within a small number of people. To get this sort of visual output which breaks it down, it is super cool, and like kudos to you guys for really putting in that effort and making such a topic-driven output.
Yeah, and to get rid of these org descriptions, so that's the key point, really.
Yes, that's right.
So, and personalization and pages that takes a personal point of view help us as well to promote our user-driven approach. For this purpose, we built this My Site page. So this is what you can see right now on the screen, My Globe, My Site. So it covers all experience around users' needs. That's, for example, my notification on the left side, my favorite apps and tools on the right side on the top, my department news, and as well as my tickets from ServiceNow directly integrated in the intranet without the need to jump away. So you have right here as well an improvement of productivity and usability, because you don't need to jump away and you see what's open, and if there is a need, you can jump. If there's no need, you can't. So last but not least, culture. So as I mentioned before, WACKER has really a long history and tradition. So it was absolutely clear for us that we can introduce social features only step by step. So that's why we started small with social channels related to the intranet itself. That means a globe help channel for normal users of the intranet and a globe publishers channel for the editors only. So this approach, starting small, was really well received by our intranet community. A couple of weeks ago, we took the next steps, all in alignment and agreement with management and the Workers' Council. So right now, committed and defined pilot groups can have access to their own social channel, and they are allowed to have social features on their own article news. So, because internal public dialogue within the intranet is something really new to WACKER employees, so it was clear for us that we have to take users by the hand to explaining them and communicating to them how to use all these social features, like what's alike, what it is. So quite normal to other intranets and other companies, but useful for WACKER employees not used to that internal public dialogue. So right now, social activity is growing now, but sometimes there's a good idea to change from heavy topics to more funny stories. As you can see on the screen, you have these breed and crystals, and these sort of stories normally work very well, but they are really a good part of a social intranet as well. So just to round up the session, hopefully you have taken from my examples and from Kar's examples, so that all these three aspects, code, communication and culture, are quite important and linked like a chain. So for modern intranet, it's really crucial to spend time on them. But keep in mind, so as you might say in English, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Mm-hmm. So it's good to have an eye on code, communication, and culture. So thank you for your attention. Thank you, Kars.
I love that. That is correct. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and that's a really great case study. Like, I've loved seeing all the different. It's good visual when you get the visual cues to see, like, you've got the communication side, but then like the culture side, you knew your company, you knew the able to work with the Workers' Council, so you kind of slowly tease that stuff in, bring in the fun elements so that people can come along that journey with you and then build it up over time. So thanks for kind of sharing all those insights, and hopefully everyone's seen how we've taken some of the theory that I spoke about, those characteristics, and how you've seen them implemented in WACKER's code, communication and culture model. So it's now time for the Q&A session. So if you have any questions on code, communication and culture, how WACKER did anything, how they implemented certain things, or if you've got any questions about the theory stuff, please do submit a question in your Big Marker page. You should be able to see a Q&A section there. So ask away, any questions. I'll give you a minute or two to collect your thoughts. Hopefully we've got some cool questions coming in, and between Heinz and I will do our best to answer them.
Can't hear you, Kars.
Yeah, we'll give another 30 more seconds to let people put their questions in, and hopefully we'll have a couple of things coming through, and I'll make sure. Okay, cool. So I've got the questions coming through on an iPad, so bear with me. I'm going to grab those questions, and we will see what's coming through. Bear with us. Also, whilst we're waiting, I also really want to know if we have any of the results from the poll earlier, whether people like IT, comms era, if that concept intrigued anyone. So happy for anyone to post any like comments or insights on that. just bear with us 1 second. Gives you extra time to put some extra questions in, or if you want to be a bit more descriptive, ask more probing questions, put in as many as you want, and hopefully get to the best ones. We've got some time, so don't worry about it. Great, so I've got the questions coming now. Thank you very much. Cool, so we've got a few things coming through there. So I've got one coming in from Suzanne, and this one's for you, Heinz, if you can hear me. So what is the one thing that you would say to the IT department who has been convinced that the intranet is for the employees and needs to be updated regularly? So I think it's a culture type question. How do you keep it fresh?
How to keep it fresh? So to have the right tool, or not the right tool, but the right mindset. I don't know if you can't hear me.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Mm-hmm. So what's really important is the right mindset. So to have the mindset for continuous development, and that's the most important thing. So agility, agile, so that's sometimes a buzzword, or it does not need to be Azure DevOps or something like that. It needs the right mindset, and the key thing is to have a workforce or a core team, so working together with comms and IT, and all these three aspects are really important. That's one of the key success factors in my personal view.
So we've got a few questions here. We've got another one here, which is about, so it's an interesting one, actually. It's around how, so we've spoken about ownership. There's a question around how, within WACKER, how is that intranet team structured? So obviously you've got loads of different people from different departments working on this kind of collaborative tool. How do you guys work together? What sort of structure does that break down to?
Yeah, so you've seen on one screen the Azure DevOps environment, and what we are doing during the week is we have some estimation planning meetings. So let's say in an agile sense. So working me and with the comms team and the global office together. So estimating what should be done and what's the work for the actual or the next sprint.
Oh, and I've also just noticed as well that people can vote on the questions, so I'm going to take the popular ones now. So this is a good one. How many people? I'm going to merge some questions here. So how many people contribute to the content of the WACKER intranet? Is it only comms employees? Do you have your SMEs, your subject matter experts also contribute? And then just to kind of follow that up as well, based on that answer.
It's a number of the editors, I suppose, right? So
yes,
about
exactly.
300, 400, 300 to 400 editors. So different department all over the globe. So in the different regions and production sites. And one editor has more time to contribute to the intranet, the other has less. So, but there is a steady team on corporate comms. So for the corporate news and this section. So, but for department news and content, there are responsible coordinators and so-called publishers. So in the right term, I would say editors. Yeah. So that are contributing to the intranet.
And I guess so. That's a lot, like a lot of content contributor, which is good because it means you get diverse content for different people, different locations. We spoke about being representative and having different content for all the different types of employees, and obviously you've got different departments involved. So how do you make sure that the various department requirements, that obviously there will be loads of requirements, how do you make sure that the intranet doesn't become too big and too unmanageable and that it just doesn't balloon in size?
So we made a balance between topic-driven approach and organization, but only on a top level. So we have only top departments, and so it structures against, so let's say, polysilicons, as I mentioned, and biosolutions, and also central teams like IT or comms department. So, but that's it. Not no other teams below.
Cool. And I've got a good culture question here as well. It's like, how do you? There's a couple of culture questions actually. How do you change the culture of sending emails and perhaps using some more static, out-of-date communication methods? And obviously, you spoke about how WACKER is quite a historical organisation, quite traditional. How do you go about changing that culture from being totally email-led to building dynamic pages, having cool widgets, personalization, this sort of stuff?
First of all, you need to be patient. So because it's only really step by step. So, for example, with the broadcast facility within the Unity system, you can have a shift from sending out emails, static emails, up to leading them, so just a notification and going directly into the system. So that would be my path to convince them step by step. But it's not that you can shut down your email system. That's not possible.